This is Joel.
Daniela.
And from moving to Mexico, bienvenidos a nuestro canal. Bienvenidos a Guanajuato, the town and the state. And bienvenidos to another episode of
Behind the Mexican Door.
And we're in a very special place today. I had this, it's a Canadian connection.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day when I used to have open houses, because I'm a developer from Canada, we would celebrate a completion of a project. So we would do an open house there and invite all of our friends, family, and client list. Susan used to run a catering firm, and she was a chef and would always do our catering. And then one day she kind of moved to Mexico with her husband, Andre, and I've been kind of keeping in touch every now and then. And when we came on this trip, I'm like, I think I know someone from Canada who actually has a little hotel in Guanajuato. So I reached out to Susan, and we kind of put the connection back together, and here we are. They've invited us to spend the night.
That's so nice.
She's not here. She's in Canada. But her husband, Andre, is here. Hey, Andre.
I'm Andre. Joel,
Danny.
Danny, pleased to meet you.
But our car is kind of parked where we shouldn't be, and I think you have a garage.
Yes,
Okay.
we can, if you go down the road
Yeah.
about 500 meters, there's
Yeah.
an OXO on the right, then there's a Returno, you come back, and the parking is on this property, but it's below us,
Okay.
full level.
So
All right.
that's his tunnel.
Oh, that's cool.
One of the tricky things here is, how do you finish the top of the tunnel? Because this is an open cut.
Right.
Probably heard of subways that have open cuts, right? And then they just put in flat concrete, they pour it, and everything's kosher. Well, that doesn't really fit with the vocabulary of the city, because the city is all made of tunnels. So I came up with an idea to put in a steel cage work here out of rebar, and then I put chain link fence on it. Then I took the stones that we took out of the wall, we put it on top, added mortar and concrete, and then I moved that framework, I removed it, and we moved it up, and we repeated the process, and we moved it up again. It's the first time I've seen anyone use that trick. You know, how sharp these edges are, how perfectly put them in place. Like, this is not a person who started doing this on his coffee break. You know,
Very precise.
beautiful work. And also you can see even these pieces here, which are not, this is not really a high quality stone. It came from this site. But look at this wall.
Yeah.
So to retain all the soil on the other side, this wall is 5.5 feet thick at the bottom, because you need to have enough mass to retain the forces of the soil. Because up there is where the soil was originally in the stone. So there's a lot of earth moving that took place here. So everything that you're seeing here is basically was stone. We brought in a couple hundred truckloads of soil so that we could get some growth in the plants happening. Of course, that's a problem, because you're importing bacteria and viruses from other parts that it's not naturalized here, so it takes time for all that to settle out. But I got the soil from over there in Mayado. There's a guy who has keeps about 100 head of cattle.
Yeah.
And he's got a piece of land that's got a flat spot. And the rains come, and they bring the topsoil down. And that's where he has the cows doing their thing, shall we say, eating, and the other end of the equation. And so you have this extremely
Rich and potent soil.
The problem I had was I mixed it with some regular soil, but I should have mixed it with more soil. So we had a couple of years trying to manage viruses and bacteria from that soil and get it all balanced out. I think we're pretty close now. Everything is starting to calm down. We have two gardeners, and actually they're here today. And we have an agronomist, and he helps manage all the viruses, bacterias, all the little animals. He brings in spiders, sets them up.
He brings them in.
He brings them in because, you know, there's a natural system that has to take place. This site was stone, and I don't want to get into the nuances of everything that happened on this site before we got here, but let's just say it was an activity center for youth.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
Do worms play a big part in that and keep getting the
They
soil and
do.
the bacteria?
There's actually a really neat chap here in the city. His name is Kenny. He calls himself the worm doctor. And he specializes in red wigglers. And so he brought some of those worms here. That got our compost going. And so we've got them hanging around in the compost pile, and he's advised us on how to keep them happy. But we've got lots of worms. Cool. And the chickens also love to hang around with those.
For sure.
Deal with that.
So what is this area here that we're in?
We call this the plaza. So this is a public area. We call it a common area for our guests, and they can come here and party, and they can smoke here. Of course, in Mexico, you want to have shade,
Right.
so we got a little bit of shade there. In the morning, if they want to come up for coffee, then this spot is in shade.
Sure.
So development of properties in Mexico, you really have to think about shade. In northern climates, you think about how do we capture the sun.
Right.
Here, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. So that's an important element that we
Yeah.
try to keep.
And then
in mind.
But
you
look
have
at
a
the
beautiful garden here, like the wall.
Yeah.
And then I can see another garden spot there. Should we
Yes.
go there?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. So, I know people think that cactuses will just survive without water, which is true. But if you want them to flourish, like this one here, this cactus was a baby. We're talking a couple of inches high. I'm going to say 2.5 years ago. But we water it. One of our biggest costs here is watering. And we have a 76,000 liter cisterns over here that help us manage that. But we're just in the planning stages of tripling that capacity so that we can keep up on the watering and make sure everything looks
Are you still getting
vibrant.
the same rainy season as they do like in Mexico City, or is it slightly different here?
It can vary quite a bit. We can have a situation where the rains start already in April.
Right.
May, you can have torrential downpours of, this much per hour. This year it didn't start till July, but we've had a good rainy season, and our cisterns are overflowing.
So you're collecting rainwater as well?
We are.
Okay.
We are. In Mexico, it doesn't seem to be a big issue, as you may know, that in certain parts of the world, it's very strictly considered to be a resource that is owned by the crown or by the government, and they don't look very highly on you, even if you have just a rain barrel. Obviously, we have a very significant series of rain barrels here.
So they own the rain.
Yeah, they do, because it's a natural resource.
Right.
It's no different than, say, oil in the ground or coal. But in Mexico, I think people would have the authorities would have a tough time stopping someone from collecting some rain.
Wait, before we move on,
Yeah.
what is this here?
Oh yeah.
That's the workshop. I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
have a
let's
look.
check it out.
Let's check it out. It's the wood workshop.
So this is the wood workshop.
This is the wood workshop. Yeah. So I cut my own trees here. I look out and I find dead tropical trees. I cut this in March of 2020.
And why the aging? So the wood has to dry out.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can see even at this moment, I've got these clamps on it to keep it from going all over the place. The most important thing in drying wood is patience. If you don't have patience, don't try to do this.
It's like many things in life. Beer, wine, like you
Women.
can't mezcal, tequila.
Mezcal, tequila, etc.
So
Yeah.
you get wood from all over Mexico shipped here?
No, not usually.
Okay.
These trunks and these slabs, the tree, I cut them locally.
Oh, okay.
I go down these little roads and I start searching for them.
Yeah.
And when I see the bark falling off and there's no leaves, then that's a pretty good indicator to me. I want to go and try to find the owner, negotiate. I mean, usually you start with someone called the velador, which is the watchman, because let's just say that farm crops here can get very dynamic. They can disappear overnight unless you have a velador. So that's your first gatekeeper. You got to talk to him, win him over. Usually a cold beer helps, something like that. You can spot the horse. Can you spot the horse head there? There's his eye. There's the nose, the snout of the horse. So I thought, oh wow, because how do we deal with the legs for the sideboard? They could be something boring. So what we're trying with this one is I'm going to set it up with the horse look for the client, And I said to them, if they don't like the horse look, we can just chop the horse's nose off and we can go to a rectangular,
Right.
more of a
More of a cow.
more of a
Right?
cow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's real wood there.
that's walnut.
So what is this
these
here?
are mezcal presentation platters.
Right.
So I have a local lady. She makes the little cups for this,
Yeah.
ceramic cups. Then the sal de gozano comes here,
Yeah.
and
Fruit
chilies
yeah.
or whatever comes over here. And I make these in various exotic woods from Mexico. That is from the state of Guerrero.
Okay.
It's bocote.
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 So it's heavy, like even this?
Super.
It's solid.
Yeah, very much. This, was very fortunate. I got this in Michoacan. It's
Okay.
cherry. Cherry doesn't grow very frequently in Mexico, but in Michoacan, there's some really big ones. And CFE, the Federal Electrical Authority, they were cutting down some cherry trees because they were in the way. They were creating these lines, these power lines, and I just happened to be right there. And there was a guy who was like a couple 100 feet away from where they're putting in the lines, and he had a sawmill. So I said, hey, he calls himself Mickey Mouse. That's his name, if you can imagine.
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse, that's what he calls himself. Anyways, so I make a deal with him, and I say, look, can I buy the trunk? And then can you slice it? Oh, sure. So we figured it all out. But I was just in my little car, so we couldn't really, it was just one of those perchance things. Anyways, we sliced it in half, and 4 of us managed to get half of the piece into the back of the little car. And so that's the history of
Where
this.
that came from.
That's where that one came
Awesome.
from. This is a tree that is completely prevalent in central Mexico.
Okay.
It grows everywhere. It is one of the most robust trees you can imagine. But here's the amazing thing. No one uses this tree for anything. It's completely perplexing. And it can grow huge. Normally, this is called pirul. Normally, this tree grows to about a 16-inch diameter, which is not that great in terms of woodworking by the time you lose your bark and, you got round edges and everything. But this one, I found, fell 4 years ago here in Guanajuato City, came down and it destroyed 3 cars in a giant wind. And it collapsed the cars and it was giant. It was 2 meters in diameter.
Okay.
So we're talking a serious tree. And it's over there. The bottom there, we sliced it in the other direction for coffee tables. And so because that's 3 or 4 inches thick, it's 3 years for that to dry. And these are some leftover pieces. And it's quite beautiful when you put a finish on it.
Yeah, it's,
It's got a nice color.
Yeah, it's very
It's
rustic
beautiful.
looking.
I designed this workshop with the view in mind. I wanted it to be inspired. I wanted it to be fantastic. The only real vegetation that we have here from the original, let's call it the bald stone, is that garambullo right there. And
That's the cactus.
that's the cactus. But these other trees in here, they're all planted a couple years ago. And they were just, less than a meter tall. They were short. But we are not very frugal when it comes to water. And of course, if you water it here in Mexico,
It's growing.
it's growing. You get to the point where you don't want it to actually grow anymore. You're managing the overgrowth. You're not trying to foster more growth.
So what do you think, Joel?
Pretty well blown away.
Yeah.
I mean, when we pulled up to the property, it's from the other side, it's pretty unassuming. You're like, that's a pretty little place to maybe stay, but you don't see any of this. So then once you come through the property, I mean, it's magical all along the way.
Yeah.
From where we ended up parking, coming through the tunnel, and that
amazing.
entire story, and then the garden here it's increíble.
Well kept. They
So
were-
should we make this a two-parter, Joel?
Let's make this a two-parter.
Yeah.
Well, number one, thanks for doing the tour so far, and do not touch that dial, as they used to say. You want to make sure you come to the second part of this video and see the rest of this incredible property. And as part of our why choose Mexico City over Europe, and as we're saying, you kind of fly into Mexico City and then you create a whole itinerary around that trip, and you make that your summer vacation rather than going all the way across the pond. There's so many more, I think, more interesting things in Mexico than you can actually find over there. And you got to come stop in Guanajuato and stay at this beautiful hotel.